a monumental thing you've created with this album, James. I wasn't really expecting the experience I had the first time I listened to it. It's very powerful. It's a concept album, isn't it? Can we call it a concept album?
Go for it. Yeah, it is. It is loosely a concept album. It's based on the life of somebody called Victor Jara, Jara. He was a guy that grew up in Chile. He was kind of born into what you would call the peasantry class in Chile. He was born into a plantation. And of course, there wasn't much expected of him in life, except for to be a blue-collar worker in Chile and probably work on the plantation.
Yeah.
But his mother did an amazing job on him. She pretty much reared him on her own. And she was determined that he'd get an education. And kind of like she played guitar and she sang as well. And then when she didn't play guitar and sing anymore, he learned to play and sing on her guitar.
Yeah.
And then he went into seminary, thought of becoming a priest, thought of becoming an accountant. And somehow he found himself in university from his humble beginnings. And became a theatre director. And he started playing his own songs. And he was very politically minded. He was always going to union meetings, and he was always playing for the copper miners, because copper mining is such a massive industry in Chile. And basically, cut to the chase, he helped get a very progressive government elected. And then there was a right-wing coup in Chile, and he was overthrown by General Pinochet, and he was murdered in that coup. Yeah. So he was somebody that I've always been aware of from the mid-80s. And I had a friend that was writing about him a lot. And I co-opted a lot of what my friend was writing, and I turned it into an album. Yeah. I really focused on his music, because when I knew about Victor Jara, it was pre-digital. This was the mid-80s. And when you heard about somebody, you had to go to an encyclopedia, or you had to go to a library, or you had to just go to a bookshop. And I'd only ever heard one or two of his songs. And cut to the chase, 3 years ago, I managed to hear all his songs. So, yeah, I had a lot more background information. I became obsessed with his music. And my friend was writing about him, and I just decided to make a concept album about him. He was an echo that kept coming back into my life, basically.
Because I've heard the name many times over the decades, but I've never, like you said, back in the day, like when Joe Strummer mentioned him, you wanted to learn about the chap, you'd have to go to the library, which I never did. I was aware of this guy, but it's only thanks to you releasing this record that I've gone and read his backstory.
Well, I mean, I was trying to trace because I discovered him through other musicians always mentioned his name. So the first time I ever heard his name was in a song called Washington Bullets by The Clash. Yeah. And I was off the album Sandinista. Then after that, it was Working Week. You remember Working Week, that kind of jazz collective? Then U2 wrote a song about him. Simple Minds dedicated an album to him. Kind of like Christy Moore dedicated a song to him. Yeah. It's endless, you know. And so I'm just one in a long list of musicians. I kind of became fascinated by him and his music. And I think his music is a massive part of it, because he's a protest singer. And what do you think of when you think of protest songs? You think of somebody staring you right in the face and saying, I'm against you, fuck you. Yeah. He's not like that. He's very much more tender when he sings, you know?
Very much like Billy Bragg, you know, in every respect.
A bit more blunt, yeah, a bit more.
I was going to come to this later in the conversation, but one of the heartbreaking things about it is like reading about this guy and listening to your album about him, is that he's one of us. You know, he's a musician, he's a creative, he's a man of the people, he wants to make the world better. It was exactly like...
He's humble.
What, yeah?
Working class, short. He's me!
But, you know, as often happens it's still now in this fractured and, you know, wobbly world we live in, these are sometimes during times of unrest, these are the first people to put up against the wall, aren't they?
They were. I mean, kind of like, it's really strange, because you can get inspired by something like Victor Jara, but you can never actually reach the heights that he reached. You can never actually live up to his idealism, his strength, his bravery. And actually, as a musician, it's hard to measure up against him, because he has this real feminine quality to his voice where it's powerful, but he never rams it down your throat. It floats. Yeah. It's more like a higher version of Tim Buckley. His voice has some kind of grace and power without being too over the top. Yeah. You know, as a singer, I'm quite emotionally incontinent. I'm a bellower. I go for it. But something like Victor Jara doesn't. You know, he floats it on a raft to you. So yeah, you can look at something like Victor Jara and you can be inspired by him, but you can't follow him. You just can't.
I think you've reached a place, you know, vocally and spiritual on this album that isn't like what you do with the Manics. Like you say, you're not belting it out. It is quite delicate in parts, isn't it? Profoundly sad.
Yeah, it is. And that's kind of, I think Sometimes, yeah. I mean, kind of, because whenever I listen to his songs, he has a couple of songs. He has one called Te Recuerdo Amanda, which is about his mother, I think. And then it's another song of his called Manifesto, which sounds like a great single from a Sheffield band in 1978 or something, doesn't it? You know, but it's not. It's a beautiful, like almost Song to the Siren-esque kind of song. Yeah. And whenever I listen to these two songs, I realize that you've got to treat his message or his spirit with some kind of tenderness. And of course, there's parts on the record where I do let go, but he definitely inspired the record to be a bit more tender, definitely.
Yeah. And you mentioned your friend who came up with the words. It's Patrick, in it, with Nicky's brother, Patrick Jones. Yeah. And you've done a lot of work with him in the past. Did he just, when he presented you with these poems, were they complete as poems? You just took them away? Did you adapt them? Did you add any lyrics to it? Was it just purely Patrick's words?
It's purely Patrick's words, really. I mean, there might be a word or two in one song, but no, they're all his words. Right.
You just got to put all the cool music together.
I do. I mean, kind of like it's obvious that I need somebody from the Jones family to write for me. That's the only way I can work, obviously. And I was looking at, I go to his house once a week. I did before lockdown. And I was looking at all these things that he'd written, and I know his poems and I know his plays. I've been to see his plays in the theatre. He's an amazing writer. But I was looking at this stuff he was writing, and he was writing it as an emotional exercise because he just lost his mother. And his father was really ill too. And of course that affected Nicky Wire as well. They're his parents too. And I think Patrick was writing as an emotional exercise to write about something good or someone who is pure, just to try and lift himself out of the pain and anguish of when you start losing family members, you know? And so he never intended these things to be published. He really didn't. It was me that forced him. I said, well, why don't you turn it into a documentary? And then I said, why don't you turn it into some kind of psychogeographic travelogue? And then when it became obvious that he couldn't do that with those words, and he didn't really want to, I said, can I try and turn this into a concept album? And he just said yes. And I felt so lucky because the words just charge off the sheet. You know, some of the words are absolutely not. All the words are amazing, but kind of, especially some of the lines in The Boy from the Plantation, it's lungs upon your tongue, rivers of us join and run. You know, it's about him and his mother and the way that he learned how to play his guitar from his mother's guitar, that bond that fuses them together. Yeah. So I'm very lucky to have worked, which lyricists have I worked with in my life? Nicky Wire, Richie Edwards, Patrick Jones. I'm very lucky.
Yeah, you're a lucky man. And is Patrick happy with the end result?
Mostly, I think. There was one version of a song that he didn't like the music, which I had put to his words. So kind of I rewrote it. And that was Boy from the Plantation, actually. I rewrote that song. Yeah. And sometimes I just rewrote it myself because I wasn't happy. And that's the thing I found out. When you're not working within a band, you have to rely on your own opinion, and your own opinion's not always that reliable. So sometimes I would just rewrite things.
Do you find it liberating or working outside the restrictions of a band that's very much democracy or cooperative? Do you find it easier being on your own, just anything goes?
No, I don't find it liberating. I don't find it easier.
Right.
Because like I said, there are certain things that Nick and Sean will say that I just know they're right. But it's something that I'll never thought of.
Right, okay.
So I'm always searching for what they would think or what their judgment is. And that's why there are some multiple versions of songs. Sometimes I would write a song and then 2 weeks later I would think, it's not right. So no, I didn't. I didn't find it was liberating. I enjoyed it.
Yeah.
But I don't think I've never had the feeling that I need to be liberated from the working environment of Manic Street Preachers, because I actually love it. I love the tension of it. I love the collaboration of it. I love the kind of the secondhand nature of the way we communicate with each other. Yeah. So no, it's cool. And whilst it's hard to work in the studio without them, I get used to it.
A real brotherhood with them, aren't you?
Yeah, but it's the physical way they play as well. They're very physical the way they play. And I like that. I like that feeling of when I step on stage, the actual volume of what they play is actually like being in a fight. I like that. It's good.
Yeah. And The Boy from the Plantation, that's the first single from the album. Is that right?
Yes, it is. Yeah. I mean, are they singles anymore, Clint? Are they singles as we knew them anymore?
In my idyllic overview of the world, yeah, I'm clinging on to that notion of a record.
They're not, are they? You know, there's no 7-inch. There's no kind of like interpretive artwork. There's no classic potential B-side. They're not singles anymore, are they?
You still buy albums yourself? Do you go out and or do you order?
Yeah, I do, and I buy, and I do buy a lot of records from the past as well. Yeah. Absolutely. I think, you know, I went through this exercise of the last 2 years of trying to buy back a lot of records that I had sold when I was 19 to buy another guitar. Yeah. So I've been buying back lots of records I'd sold then, and I still buy lots of stuff. Like I've been trying to track down a copy of that Salt record. She's got a song called Wildfires. This song called Wildfires, which is amazing. So yeah, that's the thing. I'm on the trail of that record at the moment.
Yeah, and you're a vinyl man. You do the vinyl thing.
Do you know what? If I was pushed to come to shove, I would say my favorite format was CD. I think CD is really underrated.
I mean, sonically it's beautiful as well, isn't it? But
I think kind of like one of the best ever sounding records I ever had was This Nation Saving Grace by The Fall on cassette. It was just that little bit more compression, so it sounded a little bit more violent, and it was amazing.
I think I'm looking at my vinyl copy now. It's right over there in my Fall collection.
Get the Quantifier, one of my favourite Fall songs. I absolutely love it.
Amazing band.
And Paintwork on that record is brilliant as well. So tracking it called Paintwork, which is brilliant.
Right. Did you ever get to work with Mark Smith? Did you ever get to meet him?
No, I got to meet him once. I think he was a bit worse for wear when I met him. He was at the Q Awards.
That was his natural.
Richie was a massive Fall fan.
Yeah.
He used to play Eat Yourself Fitter. A Pivot. Is it Pivot by Language? The album Pivot by Language.
Pivoted by Language.
Yeah. And I used to love that song. He introduced me to that song, "Kick a Conspiracy," which I loved. Yeah, great football song.
Who produced the album? I've not found any references to a producer as such.
Well, I'll give you a clue, okay?
Yep.
Snoosh. You know him as Pizza on a Sunday.
Yeah, that's right. Dave Eringer.
He mixed it, kind of thing. So Pizza on a Sunday mixed it.
Absolutely brilliant. Right, listen.
And then it was myself and Loz Williams, who works with us. Yeah. Good Newport boy. He comes on the road with us, and he's an amazing engineer. Yeah. And then there was one of my friends who works with Paolo Nutini, a good Cardiff boy called Gavin Fitzjohn. He produced 2 of the tracks as well.
Right. Are you familiar with Sam Fender?
Yeah, I quite like his record actually. Yeah, it was one. Why Can't I Have Been Born? James Dean Gibson Bradfield.
He's actually. I mean, the only other album I've heard in recent months that has had a profound emotional effect when I'm listening to it for the first time with yours is the Sam Fender album, his debut album, Sonic Missiles, came out towards the end of last year.
It's a good record, it is. I like the fact that every guitar seems based around the rhythm guitar. Everything just seems like it's built around him, you know. I love that. I think it's really good. And
there's a very strong Springsteen bloodline running through it as well.
Well, I think coming back to that, if we're going to do, Connect, there's a great version of Bruce Springsteen covering the Victor Jara song Manifesto in Santiago about 7 years ago.
Brilliant. I'm going to let you get off. It's great to talk to you. Give me love to the rest of the boys as and when you speak to them. I always love being with you because you're 3 of the funniest men in the industry when you're together.
That's because we go in a kind of incremental line up towards Nicky, don't we?
So one of the greatest things about doing this job is that occasionally before a conversation like this, it means I have to go and do a bit of preparation, a bit of reading. And it's just so educational, especially, like I say, I've heard the name Victor Jara a lot of times over the years, but I didn't really know much about him. But to be able to have an excuse to sit and read about him, it's so educational and exciting for a man of my age, especially. So thanks, James, for helping to learn something.
Doing the record for me was an education too. So we're in the same boat.